The first thing people noticed was the child's voice. Not the sirens, not the engines. Just a whisper that cut through the afternoon air like a blade. "He hurt my grandma. If that sentence doesn't stop you cold, the next few minutes will. Stay with me." Because what happened after that whisper turned an ordinary street into a moment no one there will ever forget. And if stories about unexpected justice, human courage, and quiet heroes matter to you, make sure you subscribe right now, because this is one story you won't want to miss. The street was the kind of place people barely noticed anymore. A narrow road lined with modest houses, cracked sidewalks, and mailboxes that leaned a little too far to the left. It sat in a quiet American town where neighbors waved but rarely talked, where problems stayed behind closed doors, and where everyone believed that if you kept your head down, trouble would pass you by. On that afternoon, the sun hung low and warm. Kids' bicycles lay abandoned on lawns, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass and old pavement. Nothing about the street hinted that it was about to fall completely silent. The child's name was Eli. He was 8 years old, thin, with dark hair that never seemed to stay calmed and eyes too serious for someone his age. He lived in the small blue house near the end of the street with his grandmother, Ruth. She was everything to him. She had raised him since he was a baby, taught him how to tie his shoes, how to read, and how to believe that most people were good even when the world didn't feel that way. To Eli, his grandma wasn't just family. She was safety. That day, Ruth had sent Eli to the corner store to buy milk and bread. It was a short walk, and she'd watched him go from the porch, waving as he disappeared down the sidewalk. When he came back, his hands were shaking. The grocery bag lay torn at his feet, milk spreading across the concrete. Ruth tried to stand, tried to ask what was wrong, but pain shot through her side, sharp and sudden. She stumbled backward, hitting the porch railing hard. The man across the street had been watching for weeks. No one knew his name, only that he lived in the gray house with the broken fence. He drank most days, yelled most nights, and had a way of staring that made people uncomfortable. When Ruth shouted for help, he laughed. When she told him to leave her grandson alone, he shoved her. It wasn't a dramatic punch. It wasn't something people imagined when they heard the word assault. It was worse in a way because it was casual, careless, like she was nothing more than an obstacle in his way. Ruth fell. Her hip struck the step. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Eli froze. His mind couldn't understand what his eyes were seeing. His grandma, the strongest person he knew, was on the ground, gasping for breath. The man turned away as if nothing had happened, disappearing back into his house. Eli ran. He didn't scream. He didn't cry out loud. His legs moved on instinct, carrying him down the street, past houses where curtains fluttered but doors stayed shut. His chest burned, his vision blurred. When he reached the small group of bikers parked outside the diner 2 blocks away, he stopped, breathless. They were impossible to miss. Heavy motorcycles lined the curb, chrome catching the sunlight. Leather jackets, patches stitched across broad backs, boots planted firmly on the ground. To most people, they looked intimidating. To Eli, they were just the nearest adults. He walked up to the man leaning against the biggest bike. The biker looked down, surprised to see a child standing there, trembling. Ali opened his mouth, but no sound came out at first. Then he leaned closer and whispered, barely audible over the hum of traffic, "He hurt my grandma." The biker's face changed, not with anger right away, but with something heavier. He crouched down so he was eye level with Eli. He asked where she was. Eli pointed back toward the street. The biker stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't make a speech. He simply nodded once. One by one, the other bikers noticed. Conversation stopped. Cigarettes were dropped and crushed under boots. Engines roared to life, not aggressively, but deliberately, like a single thought shared among many minds. Minutes later, the street fell silent. The sound of motorcycles approaching was unlike anything the neighbors had ever heard. It wasn't chaotic. It was steady, synchronized, controlled. People stepped out onto porches. Windows opened. The gray house with the broken fence seemed to shrink as the bikes lined up in front of it, blocking the road completely. Eli stood at the edge of the sidewalk, one of the biker's jackets draped over his shoulders. His hands were still shaking, but he wasn't alone anymore. The man from the gray house came out, confusion on his face turning quickly into fear. He tried to laugh, tried to act tough, but his voice cracked. He demanded to know what they wanted. The biker who had spoken to Eli stepped forward. His voice was calm, almost gentle. He said they were there to make sure the grandmother was okay. He said they were there because a child had asked for help. The man scoffed, muttered something about minding their own business. That's when the street went completely quiet. Even the birds seemed to stop. Another biker spoke up, older, his hair gray beneath his helmet. He said they believed in consequences. He said they believed in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. He said no one was there to hurt anyone, but no one was leaving until an ambulance was called and the truth was told. Ruth lay on her porch, pain radiating through her side, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling of the sky. When she heard the motorcycles, fear flickered through her. She worried Ely had done something dangerous. Then she heard his voice nearby, small but steady now, telling someone where she was. The bikers didn't rush her. They moved carefully, respectfully. One of them knelt beside her, asking permission before touching her shoulder. Another called 911, explaining calmly what had happened. They blocked the view from the gray house, forming a quiet barrier between Ruth and the man who had hurt her. The police arrived quickly, faster than they ever seemed to before. Neighbors watched as the man was questioned, his confidence draining with every word. Witnesses stepped forward. People who had stayed silent for years suddenly found their voices. Here came the first twist. When the officers ran the man's name, their expressions changed. He wasn't just a troublemaker. He had a record, prior charges, complaints that had gone nowhere. This time there were witnesses. This time there was a child. This time there were people who refused to look away. The ambulance took Ruth to the hospital. Ely rode in the front seat, clutching the biker's jacket. At the hospital, doctors confirmed her hip was fractured but treatable. She would recover. She would walk again. When she asked where Ely was, he was right there, asleep in a chair, the leather jacket still wrapped around him like armor. Outside, the bikers waited. They didn't leave when the police thanked them. They didn't leave when the crowd dispersed. They stayed until Ruth was settled, until Ely woke up and smiled weakly at them. That's when the second twist came. One of the bikers, the older man with gray hair, approached Ely. He knelt down and said his own grandmother had raised him too. He said she taught him that silence was the worst kind of cruelty. He said that was why he rode, why he and his friends stopped when someone needed help. The story didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, the street changed. Neighbors started talking. People checked on each other. Someone fixed the broken fence at the gray house after it was left empty. Flowers appeared on Ruth's porch. Ely went back to school, carrying a quiet confidence he hadn't had before. The bikers returned one more time, not with roaring engines, but with groceries and a ramp for Ruth's steps. They stayed for coffee. They listened to her stories. They laughed. The final twist came months later during a town meeting. Ely stood up, small but steady, and spoke into the microphone. He thanked the people who helped his grandma. He said he learned that day that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was courage. The room was silent, but this time it wasn't fear. It was respect. That street never forgot the afternoon when a child whispered the truth and the world listened. And now I want to hear from you. From which part of the country are you watching this video today?